Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we are going to let our guest, Miss Lori Janeski, introduce herself to our listening audience at home.
Hello. Quick correction. It's Janeski, but that's okay. Janeski also works too, because that's how you spell it. But
and you just told me that too, and I still messed it up.
That's okay.
Normally for the introduction, I'm really loud, and I use my former tour director voice because I did, like, when I was in college as a graduate student, I gave tours in a national park as a history intern. So you do that voice, but you've got the little one there trying to sleep just off camera. But I don't want to be really loud and wake him up.
He's got two older brothers. He can sleep through a marching band, so you're good.
Oh, well, if I'd known that, but oh well, we're through that part. So, all right. The next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we first found them. So I actually found her on Twitter. She was interacting with the publisher for Richard of Tuscany Bay. Another last name I can never pronounce, so we're just going to call him Richard. Palinelli,
I think.
Close enough for government work.
I don't think I've heard anybody actually say it out loud, so I'm guessing.
But I saw you interacting with him, and I liked your covers, and so I said, "Hey, that's cool." And then we interacted some on like nerd topics, and I'm like, you know what, we have to invite you to the show. And I didn't realize at the time that you actually published with him because we try to support small press authors and creators. So we'd have had you on sooner if we'd known. So it's really his fault for not sending you our way sooner. We'll blame him.
Well, I'm also very bad at marketing. It's kind of like the meme I saw the other day where it's like, I'm an introvert and I'm an author. I suck at marketing, buy my books, the end. And I'm like, that's pretty much the story of it.
That works for me too. I fake it with the podcast, and I just hope that they listen to the podcast and I'm like, oh, he's an author. Let's check out his books without me being like, buy my books. So, all right. So before we get started, madam, we have to ask you the religion questions. Are you ready?
Okay, go ahead.
Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
That is a complicated question. And until very recently, I would have jumped on Star Trek because I was basically raised as a Trekkie. But I have to say, I'm going to pick the other answer, which is Babylon 5.
Okay, excellent choice. I have had a lot of people suggest I watch it, and then we do an episode on Babylon 5. It has been credited by a lot of the sciencey types for having the best portrayal of space combat.
Yep.
I am not a sciencey type. I just wave my hand and invert the dilithium crystals and call it good.
Exactly.
But for those who care about the science, apparently that's a good one. So are there any other sci-fi properties that you grew up watching?
My parents are both Trekkies. And so we had, I think, 4 episodes of original Star Trek on VHS that we basically wore out when we were kids. And of course, then when we got a little older, we got into Star Wars. So the originals, which I think my mom still has those on VHS. And I'm thinking, Mom, don't ever let go of those VHSs. They haven't been tampered with. They are worth their weight in gold. Don't touch them. But we watched those for a long, long time. And then after that, my mom was always a reader. So I got into some of the old school written sci-fi, like John Carter of Mars and Robots of Dawn by Asimov, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I didn't find the classics until later. So I watched the movie when it came out, Starship Troopers. Mm-hmm. And I had 2 complaints. One, the tactic sucks because why would you just run hell-mel when you could, I don't know, actually coordinate and maneuver? I mean, we knew about that since at least, the movement past trench warfare. So why would we go backwards and just all scream and run? I never understood. And people were like, oh, you got to read the book. It explains it better there, and they have tactics. So I read the book, and then I'm like, oh, some of the other classics. And then I found was it Have Spaceship Will Travel, Space Cadet, the series by Heinlein. And then The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and just sort of went from there. I like some of it, but it is sometimes harder to read just because the prose are different, like language. Yeah. So... But have you seen the movie and read the book, Starship Troopers? Do you have an opinion on which is better?
I have seen the movie maybe once, and it's been a very, very long time. And I've seen the debate about online about the book or the book or the movie. And I honestly can't say because I haven't read the book, but I'm putting that on my list of things that I have to read just because I'm curious. People get really up in arms about it, and I'm like, I don't know. I can't. I don't have.
So season 1 of the Sci-Fi Shenanigans before we rebranded. So this was 2016, 2017 timeframe. So we did 3 seasons of that. We're on season 4 of this. So yeah, 7 years ago, I did an episode on it, and I said I liked the movie better than the book as a fiction story, and I still get hate mail about that.
How dare you say you like the movie better?
So for me, the movie was an action story, and the book was a political treatise because he spent a lot of time discussing philosophy and a lot less time writing a novel. I enjoy that. I've read Marcus Aurelius several times, all right, on Stoics. I've read
I like See, now I really have to read it now.
Yeah, I've read a lot of the philosophical classics. I was an English major, or was one of my majors when I was in college, so we read all of that. So I don't have a problem reading that. But when I want an actual novel, I want a novel, and when I want the philosophy, I want philosophy. I don't necessarily like them being mixed and called a novel. But I didn't necessarily disagree with some of his takes. It didn't read like a book to me. It read like a classroom instruction,
Right.
But because of that, we still get the hate, or I still get the hate because I was the only one who had that opinion on the episode.
Majors unite. I was also an English major.
Okay, I'm recovering though. I did. Well, I was a triple major, so it was English, history, minor in sociology, and then another major in political science with an emphasis on pre-law. My advisor told me that wasn't commendable. That was just a failure to commit on my part because I was taking like 24 credit hours a semester, and I couldn't do that today. I would die. Like I just can't. I can't go without sleep for weeks at a time. But then when I got deployed, when I came back, they didn't want to pay for the extra year to finish all of that. So like, just pick a degree and we'll do your 4-year scholarship in 3. So I ended up with only a history major. But yeah, I did enjoy it, but it just seems like in college, at least, they pick the books that make you hate reading.
Yeah. Well, I had it a little better at my college. I actually did my thesis on Les Miserables.
Okay. And you enjoyed it?
Oh yeah. Good book.
I don't think that's
the Battle of Waterloo. Skip that part.
Isn't that the one that's also like a space opera, an opera?
Yeah, the musical.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Fairly accurate as far as adaptations go. They managed to distill what Victor Hugo was saying very, very well into a bunch of songs. The only the really horrible one that they didn't get right was that Inspector Javert was not actually a religious fanatic. He was just a law fanatic. So other than that, it's pretty accurate.
So did you come at writing then if you were an English major through the editing path?
It kind of happened gradually. First thing I ever wrote was actually at the end of high school and into college. I wrote a mystery about a girl who could see the ghost of a dead kid in the school auditorium. He was trapped in the West Side Story because I was a musical geek at the time. And that was actually my first writing attempt, and it's still sitting around on my computer somewhere. I'm almost afraid to open it because I'm thinking, I can't believe I wrote this garbage, But kind of got into it gradually that way, and then I didn't get serious about it till after college. But
there's a whole like Netflix stream. One of the streaming services has a whole series about a girl who died in high school, and she's like, all the ghosts that are haunting the high school just sort of hang out.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
I discovered recently when I tried to think about, well, what could I do? Could I update it? Could I make it into a real thing? They guard the copyright of West Side Story like it was their firstborn, and they never let anybody use it unless your name is Spielberg. So I basically gonna have to shelve that one. It will probably never see anywhere but the inside of my computer. So
you could just shave off the serial numbers and declare it. Of course, when I was doing stuff in high school, there were actual floppy disks, not even the hard ones. It was the floppy ones. I don't know if I could get anything on those read by anything anymore. I mean, that's almost too old at this point.
You could find an actual old computer or some kind of adapter that it would be USB compatible. I'll have to ask my mom. Both my parents are programmers. I'll have to ask.
Yeah, I don't know how you would do that because, like I said, if I even had it, it would be on like those even before the flop or the hard disks. There's all the old floppies, and those notoriously fail after a while.
Yeah, the ones that are, like half the size of a piece of paper, the really floppy ones, yeah.
Yeah. About twice, 2 index cards in size, I guess.
Yep.
It's pretty free.
Then we graduated to CD-ROM, and it was just so cool.
Yeah, I remember when we switched to the hard disk, and I was born in 81, so it's not like I'm ancient, unless you ask my kids. But it just, because I was born when I did, I watched the technology grow up as I did. Mm-hmm. So I remember not getting the CDs when you could get CDs or DVDs, or VHS, because I was convinced it would never take on. Like, you're just wasting your money. It'll never take off. Stick with VHS.
Yeah.
But I'd also heard stories about like the VHS versus Betamax, and people who'd gone all in on the Betamax from our parents' generation, and they're like, "Oh, I wasted so much money, and I didn't want to be that guy." So I'm like, "Nah, I'll just stick with VHS." I guess I was wrong.
I held on to CDs for a long time. I don't think I ever actually owned my own MP3 player. My sister loved hers, but then I finally went to, no, I'm going to have a computer full of music now. But,
yeah, I'm old enough to remember when Napster was like trying to send everyone to jail for the illegal downloads.
Yeah. Napster. I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yes. Back in the old school days.
Scary. It's like, now I'm old. There are kids in our religion class on Wednesday night. I'm thinking, I'm going to make a Lord of the Rings reference. Wait, they weren't even born when Lord of the Rings came out. Darn. Got to come up with a new reference. It was really sad.
Lord of the Rings wasn't that long ago, was it? 2001. Crap, it has been a while.
Yeah, it's really scary.
That can't be true.
I must some quote, and now I can't remember. It might have been potatoes, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. I can't remember now what I said, and they're looking at me like, huh? And I was like, guys, it's Lord of the Rings, and that's when Matthew said, where they weren't even born when Lord of the Rings came out, and I'm like, I feel old.
That's crazy. It feels like just yesterday. I remember watching Last of the Mohicans in the movie theaters. And I was like, that wasn't that long ago. And then I looked it up. I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah, saw another good meme that I will mention. Is that somebody said 20 years ago, and I immediately thought 1987. And then they're like, no, 2000. And then it has a picture of somebody who was like crying.
Yeah.
I think, 20 years ago, the 80s. No, 2000. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you get that cognitive dissonance when you look in a mirror and you expect to see that your 20-year-old self, and you're like, where did that go? What happened? Where'd the time fly? So, all right. And because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, the Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
Of those three, I'd have to do Chronicles of Narnia, but I will put in a plug for David Eddings and the Belgariad.
That was the first actual chapter book I ever read.
Really? Oh, I actually read the sequel first. I found it in the high school library when I was in high school. I didn't know that it was a sequel, so I just picked up Guardians of the West and went on with it. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm missing something here. So I actually read them out of order. But
so when the grandfather changed to when they would shift and he became a wolf for the first time and just running through the woods, I'm like, that is so cool. And I was like in love with it after that.
Yeah, I love that part.
And that's where I got in, first fell in love with the concept of being able to shifters as separate from a werewolf, because technically you're shifting into a wolf, but I don't know. I think some would argue they're distinct. But anyway, I got into it because of that book, and I'm like, that would be so cool to just be able to talk to my dog and run in the woods with it. Yeah, it would be awesome. So it's a good series. It's out on audio now. They're getting most of them brought forward, and they're digitizing a lot of it for ebooks now.
Nice.
At one point in time, the older books were just getting photocopied into the system. And so one of the books, and I won't name names, they skipped a whole chapter on accident when the interns brought it online that way. Whereas the David Eddings ones, they're actually properly getting them up as digital files. They must have better interns is all I can say. So
poor interns get all the blame.
Yeah, and all the credit, though, if it goes right, must have been the interns. They're not checking their own mail.
No.
Okay, so this is an important question because once you hit a certain age, they stop asking you, but we're going to ask you here. So what is your favorite dinosaur and why?
That would be the Dimetrodon, which I had to look up. I will admit that. Recently, my oldest son got a bag of plastic dinosaurs as a gift, and so I have been stepping on them all over the house. That one is my favorite. I step on it most often. It would have to be a toss-up between that one and the pterodactyl.
It could be worse. They could be Legos.
We step on those too.
Those would literally kill you.
Yep.
So
they're going to replace the hot coals in hell with Legos. that you can step
That's
on.
just cruel and unusual. I mean, that's like taking it too far, though. I don't know if even the devil is that mean.
That would be the special hell.
Yes.
People who talk at the movies.
Yeah.
Yes, I quote it. I had to do it. I'm sorry.
Yep. All right. And because we are civilized human beings, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Tea, which I was just drinking. My mom teases me that would you like some tea with your lemon? I put lemon in it. Lots and lots of lemon. I suppose it would technically be more like an Arnold Palmer than actual tea, but it's still tea.
What kind of tea do you put in there?
My favorite is the Twinings English breakfast. Just plain old black tea. Also, a very good one if you like loose tea. Frontier Co-op has a really good one.
Yeah, when I was going to grad school, there was a Tiavana nearby, and that's where I got into the teas are a lot better when they're like loose leaf, and you lose a lot of the nutrients and stuff in the bagging process. Mm-hmm. But Tiavana went out of business, I think.
Those coffee drinkers, they put it out of business. Bless you.
Well, Tiavana was really good. They had, and I'm normally a coffee drinker, but they had one. It was a tea. I don't know what it was. I can't remember, but I just remember it tasted like Big Red gum. And it was like delicious and like extra caffeinated. And then they went out of business and I couldn't get any more. And I'm like, crap, I didn't write down what it was. It just like on my label, I just wrote Big Red. When I stuck it in, because you get the tea containers that are like airtight to store the loose leaf. And I couldn't get the sticker to move from the bag to that. So I just got like tape and I wrote on it Big Red instead of the proper name because it was smaller, like less words. And when they went out of business, I was like, no, it was unfair. So if you know what that tea is, people, just reach out. Like, send me an email. I want to know. I'm just saying.
See, now I'm curious. The tea that tastes like Big Red. I'm very curious now.
Yeah, if I find out, I will let you know. All right. And we ask you that question, dear listener, because as you know, we are affiliated with the coffee brand Coffee. So if you are interested in an American-made brand that sells coffee, tea, or hot chocolate and kinds of snacks and desserts and such, use the code podcast grunts. The link is in the show notes, and you get 10% off, and we get a little bit of kickback, and you help fund these episodes, and we greatly appreciate all of it. So with that being said, let's dive in. So you obviously, if you were writing in school, you've always loved writing. What made you decide to go from, I'm just going to major in reading because I like English, to, holy crap, I want to make this a career? Like, how did you make that crossover?
Well, it took a long time. The first book in the series of the Carter Files, Phoenix, actually took me about 10 years to really get ready to see the light of day. I'd work on it and change it and then leave it for a while and then go back to it. I actually submitted it to Bain and got totally rejected. And looking back on it, I'm like, you poor amateur. You had no idea what you were doing. But that kind of stuff. And my husband really helped me because he's an editor. And he actually really helped the science of it. What works on Star Trek will not work for us amateurs. So just because they have perfectly Earth norm Class M planets all over Star Trek doesn't mean that it's good for us to try and do the same thing. So thanks to him, my science and my story is a lot better, and I really appreciate that. But it was just one of those things that I loved it so much. I'm like, I've got to make it good enough to read for other people. And one of the big reasons was that you don't see a lot of cops in space. The only one that I found at the time when I started this, I hadn't watched Babylon 5 because Garibaldi absolutely does count as a space cop. But the only one I really knew of was Elijah Bailey from the Asimov series, the Robots of Dawn. He was the only real space cop. And I'm going, I love cops. Crime shows are my thing. I love all kinds of crime shows and sci-fi. So you know what? We're going to combine the two. And that was how that got started.
Okay. Well, you got to get the most important detail right, because we know that every alien planet actually looks like Canada.
Good point.
We learned that on Stargate.
Yes, I love Stargate. Indeed.
Tree. I actually love that series so much. Like,
I wish now looking back on it, I wish I had said that along with Babylon 5 for my favorite sci-fi. They will not call John O'Neill. They will, in fact, call him up.
Yeah, I loved the movie. I watched that in the theater, and I was like, man, they've got to do more with this because I wanted more. And then they did the series, and I watched all of SG1. Of course, I didn't watch it all live because I was doing the college thing and the Army thing, so I watched it, years later, from start to finish. And I watched all 10 seasons of SG1. They kind of lost me at the Onai part. Like that was just, it was okay, but it felt like they were running out of ideas.
Yeah, as soon as O'Neill wasn't the commander of their squad anymore, I'm kind of like, I miss O'Neill. So
yeah, I did like Amanda Tapping's character, Carter. And then I watched the Stargate Atlantis, which was kind of campy, but I mean, SG1 was too. And then I really loved Universe. Stargate Universe does not get the credit it deserves. It was a little bit grittier, I think, and it just didn't serve the target audience for the normal Stargate. Mm-hmm. And it was at the same time like BSG was coming out, the remake. And so everyone's like, oh, you're trying to copy them. I'm like, well, they're not the first property that ever was gritty. Like that's not just a Stargate thing.
What was the name of that actor? He played Rumpelstiltskin in Once Upon a Time.
I know you're talking about
the same, but that's the reason why I wanted to watch it, because I really like that actor, and I can't think of his name to save me.
I'm gonna look for it. I'm looking at it right now. It will tell me in just a second. It was Mr. Gold was the character's name, and he was played by blah 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 blah. Pop up. It's not the actor's name. Oh, Robert Carlyle.
Yes. Okay. So I knew Synapse would fire eventually, but he is a really good actor. And when I saw that he was in Universe, I'm like, oh, I gotta watch this. And
it was really good. I liked even the Stones a little bit. It was weird, but I mean, I liked the trope for the communication. They ended it because it went to where all good sci-fi goes to die. The Fox Entertainment.
Fox. Almost Human. I still haven't forgiven them for canceling Almost Human.
Or Dollhouse.
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen all of Dollhouse, but Matthew really likes it. So
it was really, really good. And if you want to see what her husband looks like, he was actually on our map episode. So go check that one out. It was back in season 2, I believe. But yeah, so I like that one. But they ended it on a cliffhanger with kind of will he, won't he survive at the end with Eli. And
it didn't get renewed.
Yeah, because it didn't get renewed. And then they were like, well, just read the graphic novel and we'll give you the ending. So I spent a crap ton of money when it came out because I didn't wait for it to go lower in price. I think I spent $40 on that graphic novel or something ridiculous like that. And then it ends on a cliffhanger too.
Oh,
I'm like, you jerks.
Kind of like the one and only Firefly graphic novel, which is right after the end of the book. It's around here somewhere, but
isn't the graphic novel the story of Preacher?
No, not the one that is around here somewhere. I wonder, it might be on the bookshelf right over here. No, it's the sequel basically to the movie Serenity. Dark Horse Comics.
Okay.
I'm curious. I'm gonna go because the comic shelf is right over here. I'm thinking I might go on the commercial break. I'll go look for it.
There you go. But yeah, I really love that property. If they asked me to write in it, I totally would. Speaking of dinosaurs, did you ever watch Primeval?
Nope.
So there was a British version, and then the Canadian version came out, and then they linked them at some point. The basic idea is there are anomalies, which are rifts in time, and that's how you get like sightings of Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and all these things, because they're actual dinosaurs that are coming back in time through time loops, essentially. And their whole job is they're a secret government organization that cleans up the mess, so to speak. And I really dig that because I was a huge Jurassic Park fan. I mean, I even as an adult watched Camp Cretaceous, the kids version that they released. Like I said, I loved dinosaurs. I'm like, I totally write in that one too. But unfortunately, none of them have come knocking. By the time they do, I'll be big enough that they won't be a good enough IP to, what I mean? Like, by the time they approach you, generally speaking, you're out of their league or vice versa, But those were some favorites. If your kids like dinosaurs, that's a good one.
Yep, definitely gonna try that.
I mean, there's danger implied, and some people do get hurt, but it's not like gory. I don't know. I guess you call it PG-13 probably. So I'll send you the wiki page to it on Disc. Oh no, where is it? Twitter. There we go. That's where I have you. So you can check it out. But anyway, all right. Well, we've been rambling about, and I want to get started talking about your book. So I'm going to do it a little bit early, and we're going to play that commercial. We're going to shamelessly shill for the woman, and then we'll come back and we'll get nerdy about your books.
Sounds good.
Boom.
When a young officer no longer wants to be an instrument of destruction. Sacrifices are a necessary part of leadership. Get used to having blood on your hands. And whose job is to help a warlord annihilate humankind. I will unleash this bioweapon on the galaxy. But first, I need to control her. He plays a dangerous game to escape to the warlord's greatest rival.
Hundreds of people loved her. They gave their lives for her, and she will never know.
Discover a galaxy with epic space battles, tangled loyalties, and the pursuit of freedom, sacrifice, and redemption. The Handler's Gambit by Ingrid Moon. Available wherever books are sold. And check for the audiobook coming soon.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And we are sorry about the technical difficulties. Normally it mutes the guests too, and it didn't. So if you heard a little bit of noise in the background, we apologize. I manually muted her during the commercial, so that didn't keep going on. That was not our fault. That was StreamYard's.
Sorry.
We blame them because they're not here to defend themselves.
Sorry, I talked to the baby when there's nobody else around.
That's okay. Everybody's had kids gets it. I sung Army cadences to mine, so yours is probably healthier for his mental health. Like we learned about, what happens to communists because my Army cadences started in the 90s when I enlisted. And everybody that did the training was a Cold War veteran. So lined 100 commies against the wall, shot 98 till your barrel didn't work. The whole. I'm going to leave it there because if you know, and we don't want to gross out the civilians. But I'm just saying they were kind of vicious, those writing cadences.
That works for me. We need a little more of that.
Well, the whole point of it is to dehumanize the enemy and desensitize you to violence is what the training at basic training does. And it works very well. So we'll call it good because I'm alive and we'll move forward. But anyway, all right. So we brought you here and I'm going to throw the covers up on the screen. So this is book 1, and her series are the Carter Files. This is book 1's The Phoenix, and book 2 Ravens. And if you just want both of them, we're going to throw those up.
And I promise neither one of them have been plagiarized.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Someone accused you stealing the covers. And other than the color, like blue and red and black, there was nothing similar about them. I didn't get that accusation at all. I'm like, oh, maybe it's because I'm colorblind. I'm missing something. And your publisher went to town on that idiot.
Oh, yeah. It was a lot of fun. It was 3 days worth of drama on social media. And that is the reason why the Phoenix cover has the best-selling tag on the cover. I sold more books in those 3 days than I ever have before. It was a lot of fun. But
and the wins where you can get them.
Where you can get them is Amazon. It probably is the easiest way to do that.
Absolutely, and we have the links to your books in the show notes. We always link to the guest's book that we're talking about and the commercial. So. But all right, so obviously you mentioned that you started this series with the idea that you wanted to have kind of a police story because you like mysteries. But was that the extent of the inspiration or was there more to it? How did that come to be for you?
Well, probably the biggest inspiration on that point was it's not really a geek topic, but I was really, really into Mary Higgins Clark mysteries as a kid. I read, I don't know how many of those things. The Queen of Suspense, may she rest in peace, awesome lady. But that was one of the big sources of inspiration for me for the whole thing. And I always wanted to have somebody tell me that they stayed up all night to finish it, which actually happened. I was really happy about that. But being able to have that kind of excitement for somebody that because I would do that. I would stay up and be like, okay, one more chapter. I'm just going to read one more chapter. And next thing you know, I finished the whole book. Wow, that was great. Crud, it's 3 a.m. and I have to go to school in the morning. I was definitely that person. But
so I'm going to ask you a question that might reveal your age, and you can feel free to lie. But so I'm old enough that I remember having actual paper books and a flashlight hiding under the covers. Like my parents, who were readers, also didn't know what I was doing, and somehow we were getting one over and sweating because the flashlight and the blanket made you hot as the desert.
The little desk lamp that you kind of point downwards towards the floor so that you're reading kind of sideways like this.
Yeah. So do you remember that, or did you start with like ebooks?
Oh yeah, definitely did that. Lots and lots and lots.
And now the kids will never know the struggle, like on road trips where you didn't have a flashlight, because you can't turn a flashlight on at night when you're driving. You'll blind them and you'll fall off a cliff, right? There's some of the shows have memed that whole, because it does destroy your night vision goggles or night vision, but you can tell I write mill sci-fi because I went straight to night vision goggles. But it's not as bad as that. But you kind of have to be over dramatic with kids to get the point across. So like I was convinced if I turned that flashlight on, we were all dying.
We're all gonna die.
We're not even near a cliff, but we will fall off of one.
A cliff will spontaneously appear just because I turn on this flashlight.
Right, because I turned the flashlight of death on. And so like I remember like squinting into the fading light trying to read on road trips. And then it was like too dark to read and you'd be miserable. Yeah, so I get it. And then these kids with these backlit freaking Kindle readers will never know the pain.
Yeah. Oh, I even have one of the original old school Kindles that doesn't have a backlight, where they were all bragging about the paper white or whatever it was called.
I remember that.
Yeah, and it's just a Kindle. You know, it might actually be sitting here, where it's just no. But one of my kids walked off with it because it was right here on the desk. Where it is now, I may never know. But it's old and the little paint on the edges is cracking. But it's just a plain Kindle. That's all it does. It is very unsophisticated.
I liked it because it was simple.
Yep, that's all it does. It displays the text. That's
it. But the newer ones were getting harder and more confusing for me. I'm not great with technology. Part of that's the brain damage. And so I ended up getting just a tablet and putting the Kindle app on there, and it works great. And I can change the background to that tannish sepia color. And that works for me now. But yeah, I do miss the paper. I just used mine so much, it finally died. The death of the battery.
Probably going to quit on me just because it's getting beat up a little more than it used to.
Yeah. Well, and the other part of that was it was limited on what you could read because some of the books were just too high of the memory. So you probably only fit one Brandon Sanderson novel on there.
Oh yeah. The man is the king of the word count.
Yeah. So, all right.
I would like to have a contest between him and John Ringo as to who can kill off more characters. David Weber may be running a close third.
I don't know because did they have to be named characters? Because Terry Mixon killed entire planets at a time.
Good point. I don't think anybody killed a whole planet in any of those cases.
And I'm sure other authors have done that too. Like
probably
I killed regiments at a time in my first series. But in my defense, they had it coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where it depends on how you define your term, so you know what counts.
Right. And of course, when you said they had it coming, my brain immediately went to Chicago. I'm sorry. They had it coming.
Yep.
Okay, I'm done. Sorry.
There's a reason I don't sing at my day job. All right, so you wanted to have sort of the space cop, and that was the basic. But how did you come up with the main character? And what can you tell us about them?
Well, Special Agent David Carter is the main character. He was basically Elijah Bailey from the Robots of Dawn, and what's the name of the other two? Caves of Steel is the first one, and I never can remember the second book. It's a trilogy by Isaac Asimov about Elijah Bailey, and he's a cop. And the best one is without a doubt Robots of Dawn, but he's this gruff, old, cranky, cynical cop, and he's the embodiment of the competent man. He doesn't have any superpowers. He's just a cop. And it's a really wonderful story. Robots of Dawn is one of the... I actually did a college paper on the Robots of Dawn, which was fun. Tracing the thought of C.S. Lewis through modern sci-fi. It was great. Got an A. But anyway, David Carter is basically that guy. And then when I didn't start watching NCIS until I graduated college. But then the more I watched of Gibbs, and it's like, yeah, he's kind of a Gibbs. He's not quite, but a little bit like that. And the secondary main character, the supporting character, is Agent Veronique de Tournay, and it's about the two of them. And de Tournay only exists because when I was writing it originally, I didn't think I could write a convincing male point of view character. So I will shamelessly admit that. I'm sorry. That is the only reason that Veronique de Tournay exists at all. but it worked out because she actually became a much better character the more I worked on it. But and it's your basic buddy cop show, and those are my favorite. We're NCIS, both new and old Hawaii Five-O, because old Hawaii Five-O doesn't get a lot of love anymore. But cop shows like that, where you're pretty certain that the good guys always win, and you can have a good laugh along the way, and that didn't seem to have a lot of presence in a sci-fi story, like I said, other than Elijah Bailey. And to be fair, Garibaldi, but I didn't know Garibaldi existed when I started writing it. So I'm a recent Babylon 5 fan. So, but that was kind of the concept, that human beings don't really change. We might go out into space, but we're still going to need cops.
Okay. Are there aliens in this universe?
Nope, no aliens, just people.
Do you plan on that at some point in time, or are you satisfied with just humans?
Nope, for now it's just humans. I'm working on one in my head of totally different sci-fi that I'm going to put aliens in.
Well, I mean, technically, if they go to other planets and there are plants there, you've got aliens.
Well, technically.
Yeah, it's just got to be alive on another planet. We just always assume when we say alien, we mean sentient.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm told it's not even the right word. I think somebody told me once that we should be using sapient, not sentient, that they're different. I don't remember.
I've heard it both ways, but
I'd have to dig into that one because I don't remember. But yeah, technically, if they got microorganisms, that's an alien if it's not from Earth. So
well, this one is only in our universe. So we can be reasonably sure there's no alien life on our moon, and I don't think there's any yet discovered on Mars or any of the Jovian moons or anything like that. So I think they should be pretty safe that there's no aliens as far as I know.
They actually are now thinking that the Euclid, I think, is one of the moons of Saturn. The water one. I'm drawing a blank on it, but yeah, there was an art. I read a paper about it a while ago. They think the ocean one might actually support life.
Oh, okay.
Under the ice caps, in the water under the ice caps, but I'd have to dig that out, and maybe I'll make that a separate panel discussion. But yeah, they at least the conditions are right. Not that we found anything.
Oh, was it Europa?
Europa. There we go. That's what I was thinking.
Oh, well, I have an underwater colony on Europa in the story. It's a domed city, but it's underwater.
There was a paper recently that they think the conditions are right there to support aquatic life.
Nice. Well, I didn't say either way, but I guess now I can look back on it and see. Yes, there actually were crazy alien fish.
There you go.
Knocking on the glass for that city on Europa.
It'll be interesting to see how that future research plays out. But then we always look for carbon-based life, and we found sulfur-based life in the Yellowstone area. Wow. In the geysers. So, it's possible that there could be other stuff. I just don't know that we could if you get too crazy, you can't narrow down your search parameters,
Were they saying no kill eye? No kill eye?
No, I don't know. Probably in Morse code, we just can't read it anymore.
Right.
But yeah, so you've got no real aliens, colonies all over the place. Do you have FTL?
Sort of. It's instead of using a standard, like just a regular ship that goes from point A to point B at FTL, the main means of transportation is actually the monorail. It's I was going for kind of a noir sort of setting, fedoras and Philip Marlowe kind of feel for the setting, and so the main way to get between all the planets is basically a gigantic train that uses a wormhole to transport between the various planets.
No, I don't think anyone's ever done that I've read.
Woo! Yeah, sorry.
I don't think I've ever seen wormholes and trains together.
Yeah, there's maglev trains on the planets that's pretty standard. I was really happy when I saw an article just the other day, I can't remember now where it was, that somebody had actually been given a contract by NASA to develop trains, a rail system for the moon. And I'm like, yes, I totally predicted that, because they're using trains on Luna. But
when you think hard enough about what the future might hold, and you start just sort of analyzing what's there and then looking at what might be, a lot of authors get pretty good at predicting things. And it's not like we have any special superpower. We just started trying to figure out if this, then that, and we took everything to the logical conclusion. Yep. I remember one of the worlds that I've come back to, and I'm going to be publishing this summer, Maybe it'll be shortly after this episode airs. I predicted Brexit because the writing was on the wall when, the EU started telling the Brits where they could fish. And, they were a maritime power for too long to be told what to do in the water. I mean, it was just, it's kind of inevitable, I thought. And I was only off by a couple months.
Nice.
On my timeline. And then I edited, of course, to put the real time there, because why wouldn't I?
Right.
But yeah, it's one of those things where if you look at the future and you start thinking about where we are and you realize where the tech is and not just the tech you're using, because generally what you're using is several years old. If you look at what they're actually working on now and then you project that forward just a little bit, you can get pretty accurate in your predictions. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of cool because then you see it and like it's like on the one hand it takes the mystery, like when you open and see the man behind the curtain, but on the other to realize that if you did the same thing you could probably make some predictions that are pretty accurate too. So how you monetize that without writing that story, I don't know. I mean, maybe you could invest in the right things, but anyway, that's my soapbox. All right, so it's
more fun to just write about it.
Yeah, for me too.
The whole time, yeah.
Yeah, and you can always retcon things, which helps. You look a lot smarter than you are. So you've got the main character, and it's obviously a murder mystery. Is it the same villain throughout the Carter Files, or because that's what the series is called, or are they like independent episodic stories?
Well, I was trying to go with sort of a Babylon 5 kind of feel where it's an episode, but there's also a continuous plot. Right now, it looks like it was going to be a trilogy, but now I guess it's going to be a Bane trilogy with 5 books in it. So hopefully it'll all tie itself up. So the first one, and I wouldn't be giving away anything that you couldn't read on the back cover flap. So it starts out with a crime and then goes to major conspiracy. And then the second one is revenge. So you have the same villain in 2, but I'm kind of the opinion that if you use the same bad guy too often, your good guys start to look inept, like 24. After a while, by the time you get to season 3 and Nina Myers finally dies, you're like, oh my gosh, thank you. So I really didn't want to do that. So hopefully we won't have too many repeatedly recurring bad guys, but it's all part of the same story.
Okay. Is there character growth, or do you reset at the end of every episode? Because that's the 2 different strategies.
No, I definitely put some character growth in there.
Okay.
Because the cranky Agent Carter has to learn to be a little bit more diplomatic, and Special Agent de Tournay has to learn not to be quite so, I was going to say bookish, but that's not quite right. She's a profiler who sits behind a desk, and then she has to learn how to be an actual agent. So,
do you show her like growth, I guess, as an agent in her skills? Because sitting behind a desk and actually having to use your weapon and learn those tactics and do all that stuff are separate skill sets.
Right. She definitely has to. First, it's I'm going to follow Agent Carter's lead because he's the field agent and I'm just the profiler. But it turns out to be a lot more of a, like I said, a buddy cop thing where Carter has to learn how to be a little more diplomatic and she has to learn how to actually be a badass kind of. So,
on a scale of Disney to Dirty Harry, how gritty is your story?
It's definitely not Dirty Harry. I'd rate it firmly in the PG-13 category. I had one reviewer tell me that his name is Stephen McAvoy. He said he would be fine giving it to his 13 and 16-year-old kids. So I was very complimented by that.
Absolutely. So you didn't upset the parents. That's always a good thing.
Woohoo. One of the bad guys in book 2 drops the F-bomb exactly 1 time. And I figured that would be okay because in a PG-13 movie, you are allowed 1 F-bomb. So, and only the villain used it, not one of the good guys. So, and there's no taking the Lord's name in vain, and there's no, on-screen sex or, nothing like that. It's firmly PG-13 category.
Okay. So are there any secondary characters that are reoccurring besides just the buddy cop duo?
Let's see. The director of Division 7, which is the agency that Special Agent Carter works for, Director Gibson, he's recurring. Let's see who else. Oh, Falcon is going to be recurring too. Falcon appears in book 2. She's a very mysterious kind of secret agent cool person. And I think this is going to be one of those secondary characters that kind of takes over. So
Right.
it'll be a lot of fun. But she's very cool. And I'm hoping to have a lot of the members of the law enforcement team that you see in book 2. Hopefully all of them can come back. Agents Hall and O'Harley are going to be back, hopefully. I have an Irishman and an Englishman. They're fun. They were fun to write.
Do they fight?
Oh, yeah.
As it was intended?
I had to do a whole lot of research into how to actually write Agent Hall because he has a thick Cockney accent. And I'm like, okay, do I write it in plain English and just say that he has a Cockney accent, or do I actually write it out? And no, I had to actually write it out. English rhyming slang is a very interesting rabbit hole to go jump down. Just FYI, in case anybody was wondering.
I would probably cheat and like do it a 1 or 2 words here and there to imply, and then just say he has the accent without actually writing it, because that would get annoying real fast.
I kind of cheated. I said that his accent got thicker the madder he was. So the couple times he was really, really angry, I actually was putting, apostrophes at the beginning of words that started with H, because the H gets dropped off in a lot of those London kind of accents. And well, that'll work.
So my problem with that would be, from the creative side, if a lot of people will listen to like accents on like YouTube videos or whatever, because we live in the digital age, so why wouldn't you? And then they'll just write it out phonetically when they want to do that kind of stuff. But I'm sort of hearing, I've been around too many explosive incidents. So yeah, I don't hear most of those distinctions. I'm like, it all sounds the same to me.
Right.
So I would actually have to find some sort of like translator that would just translate, like I type it in English and it translates it into Cockney for me or something.
Well, hopefully when it comes out on audio, it will be clear in the audio, which is in the works, by the way. Both books are getting an audio version.
Nice. Are they going to be 2 books together in audio, and then the next 2 in audio, and then the third one, I guess, by itself, or are they going to do each individual audiobook?
Just individual, but they're both being read right now. So
how long
are the date on it? So as soon as I have one, it will be announced quite thoroughly.
So how long are these books?
Really, really long. That was my main problem in trying to get it into audio. Let's see.
Long is good for audio. They like that.
Yep. The first one I think came in at 180,000 words, and the second one was a little shorter. I can't remember the word count on it, but really long. Declan Finn always makes fun of me for that. So
you were actually knocking at Sanderson's door with that length.
I was trying, not deliberately, but I really did try to divide the first book in half to try and make it 2 different books. And I'm like, there is no good spot I can do this. Okay, it's just going to be a really gigantic monster book. So the second one's a little shorter, but I am firmly of the opinion that no matter what length it is, use as many words as you have to get your story told. And if it's short, good. If it's not, be Brandon Sanderson, as long as you make the words work for you.
Absolutely. But I mean, as a creator who's trying to, earn a little bit of money at what we're doing, if you can tell the story at a predictable pace that allows you to get, instead of 1 at 200,000, 2 at 100, that's better for you as a creator and still satisfying for the reader, I think.
True.
So you were close to maxing out the you were hitting the upper limits of Vellum when it comes to formatting.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
We did the anthology, it's 350,000, and we had to cheat and like do weird sizes and all of that. So I know there is an upper limit, and at 200,000 you were getting close. Well, I mean, you were 2/3 of the way there anyway, I guess. See, there's a reason I wasn't a math major. I don't do math on the fly.
Yep.
But yeah, you were about 2/3 of the way to the max. So you definitely get your money's worth when you buy this book if you dig crime stuff. Okay.
Yep.
Once the Bane trilogy of 5 books is done, do you plan on telling more stories in this universe from some of these other characters, or are you going to move on to something different?
Well, I was thinking of doing at least the first 3, and before I switch to something else, just so I don't get burnout. And I'm thinking, well, Larry Correia did 3 Monster Hunters, and then he switched to Grim Noir, and then he switched back. So I'm thinking, well, it might be a good plan. So I'm thinking of doing that at least a little while, just so that it's not everything, all Agent Carter and IPF all the time. But between me and my husband, we've kind of come up with several other characters that we would like to write stories about. One of them is a Methodist detective on Mars, which I thought was very interesting because Mars has at least in the backstory that in all of our, in my head and in some various documents, there's a lot of Catholics on Mars. And one of them is Sister Carmela, who is actually in book 1, based on a real person. She was one of the nuns at the high school that I went to, but I had to put her in this book. She's actually a member of Parliament in the book. But I'm thinking, yeah,
Did she know you wrote about her? Did you like go back and tell her?
Oh no, she died a few years ago, unfortunately.
Oh, that sucks.
But, if she had been alive, I would have done that. But she was this tiny, tiny little nun who you would just say, "Yes, sister." You don't know why, but it just comes out of your mouth. And the first time I met her was in touring the school when we first got up there, and the guidance counselor is like, "Oh, sister, this is my mom, Janeski, and her daughter, Lori. Lori is going to be a freshman here this year. This is my dad's name. This is his daughter. Do you remember him?" And she looks my mother right in the face and says, "Yes, I remember him. He should have studied more." Went, "Yes, sister." And it's like, yeah, I'm going to put you in Parliament. It was a lot of fun.
Nice.
I'm thinking, so if I have a Sister Carmela, I got to have somebody to go opposite Sister Carmela. So we came up with this Methodist detective. And I'm thinking he would be a good guy for short stories or, his own little spinoff, put him on Mars doing Mars crime.
Okay. So you don't go for the Star Trek utopia where nobody breaks laws. They just break prime directives.
No, they just break the prime directive. No, people don't really change no matter what time period they're in. And as much as I would love to have the Star Trek utopia where we don't have money, which doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I never.
Personally, I think it was just Kirk only meant in that, what was that, the Journey Home in the 4th movie. I think he meant that they didn't have cash money, but that's just me. But no, human beings can basically be counted on to screw anything up. Just give them a little time. So even in the future, 400 years from now, which is the date in the book is 2479. So even that far in the future, human beings are still going to be human beings. So you still need cops.
So would you consider this then Christian fiction, or it just happens to have religious undertones?
I tried not to make it specifically Christian. I'm Catholic, and I'm all right with, a lot of authors that I read and seem to have a lot of Mormon authors that I read, which is kind of cool. But it's not specifically a Christian book, but it does have Christian characters in it. And I think that can still speak to a lot of people, not because there's a specific message in it, but just because it's entertaining and your characters aren't going to just degenerate into crazy assholes.
Okay.
Game of Thrones. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I don't like grimdark, so Game of Thrones. And I also kind of want a series that's finished. I don't want to read a story I know I'll never get the ending for.
Right. Don't worry, I'm not going to pull a George R.R. Martin. You'll get the whole series unless I go get hit by a bus, and in which case...
Don't do that. So with the story, you said it's got moderate level of grittiness, but obviously it's hopeful if you're, from what you're saying. Would you consider this then, almost like a lighter, whatever the opposite of grimdark is, hopeful fiction? Maybe, I don't know if that's a thing. Noble Brights, what I've heard it called, but I don't know the specific definitions of that one.
Oh, that'll work. I was trying to make it sort of when it's dark, but then there's always the light at the end of the tunnel. That your good guys are still going to be good guys. They might have problems, but they're not going to suddenly turn into crazy, like I said. But I definitely wouldn't put it in the grim dark. But what did you say it was? Noble Bright?
Yeah, I heard it called Noble Bright.
Okay. That works. I mean, it's not all sunshine and rainbows and everything. I mean, you still have crazy murderers and crime. Book 2 is actually about the kidnapping of minors, which was a little right. Nothing really, really sick or anything. No, I don't have any of that really awful content or anything. It's like I said, it remains firmly PG-13. But the whole point is that even in spite of this bad stuff happening, there are still good people that try to fix it. So in that case, it's kind of, I guess you would call it Noble Bright, but
Okay. So what kind of tech, other than obviously we've got the maglevs and the trains?
The monorail, yeah.
Yeah.
The monorail is powered by a magical hand-wavium element called avium, which basically punches a hole in the space-time continuum, but it's magically harnessed and all that stuff. So it's definitely not hard science sci-fi, but it's not completely fantastic either. For other kinds of tech, there's most of the weapons used are, think Star Trek sort of phasers, only I don't call them that. They're actually called bolt pistols. And, you know, in the Next Generation movies, like First Contact and Insurrection, how they all of a sudden Starfleet had these cool rifles that just go pachoo, and they shoot this little orange little bolt out the end instead of the beam of a phaser. That's kind of what I was going for. So you have bolt-proof vests and bolt pistols and that kind of associated technology. But Special Agent Carter uses an M1911 with real bullets.
Okay.
And there's, let's see, what other technology would be fun? Oh, Mars has an atmosphere thanks to the satellites that they put around it in order to maintain a stable atmosphere. And so does Callisto. One of the Jovian moons has an atmosphere. And let's see. Short distance shuttles, and one of the new places that I put in book 2 was a oh gosh, is it an O'Neill cylinder?
I think so.
Yeah, it's a cycler that runs the, so it was a very old piece of technology for the era that it's written in, and it runs the circuit between Earth and Mars and back again. And what is the name of the actual? See, now that I put the baby in the basket, I can actually use both of my hands to type, so that's good. It's not an O'Neill cylinder. It's a yeah, the Earth Moon cycler. I don't know. It was named after one of the astronauts. Dang nabbit.
Yeah, I'm not totally. I know about the mega structures, but I don't know like specifics about all the different kinds. So I'd have to check.
Oh, it was Buzz Aldrin. There we go.
Okay.
Now, see, this is when I wish my husband was home. He's still at work, and I could just go, "Hey, Matthew, what do you call this thing?" And he'd come in here and give you a whole rundown of the science of it. He is a big fan of Isaac Arthur's recurring channel on YouTube with all of the science fiction science in it.
Yeah, it is called Isaac Arthur is his channel, and it's the Science of Futurisms, I believe.
Right.
I follow it as well. Fun fact: he was actually in Iraq around the time I was. We've interviewed him. He's an Army guy made right as well. So
cool.
Although he was one of those dirty cannon cockers, dang red legs.
It's called an Aldrin cycler, by the way.
Okay, perfect.
We'll find it eventually.
I'll have to look those up but yeah, it's a good channel if you want the science, and he kind of takes the physics because he's a trained physicist, and he takes the physics forward in his opinion, what might be based on what the physics are, we know, based on the technology we know, and speculating it forward. So it's kind of a good blend of, speculation and hard science.
Mm-hmm. I've listened to several of them, and my husband is a big fan. So if I don't listen to them, he tells me about it. So I get it that way too.
Yeah, he's a good one. I like his stuff too. I do listen to his podcast. I go back and forth on whether I listen to it or watch it because he does have good graphics. But sometimes I'm on the move and I just don't want to have the YouTube open because that drains the battery. But you can get it on the podcast app where it's audio only. Mm-hmm. So it's a good channel if you want to. You know what? Let me make a note. I'll add that to the show notes. He's a good one. But yeah, so we talked about the technology. We talked about the weapons. If you met your main characters from the Carter Files series to date in a back alley, and they knew that you were Lori, the one that made their tormented life their life, how do you think you'd fare in that fight? Would they try to kill you, or would they just be like, arrest you?
Probably depends on which one. Carter might want to kill me, but he, being a gentleman, would not do so. Veronique might slap me in the face. So,
Okay.
I'm trying to think of who else would. Powell the hacker might have some choice words, but no, Carter might be the maddest, but he's got a gritty backstory too. But
yeah, gritty backstory. People tend to want to get even.
Yep.
So would you live in this world if you could?
I think I would. I would definitely want to be a farmer on Mars because I do have those guys. Think Old West only on Mars. They're not really prominent characters in the first one, but in the second one, but the first book has them because it is one place where you can mine the mystical adium that powers all of the monorail technology. So the Martian farmers have a little bit of presence there, and they're going to come back. So,
do you like go into the farming stuff, or do you just kind of leave it?
No, so far it's just kind of left as they're there and it works. But I'm hoping to get a little deeper into it the more the story goes on.
Yeah, that's one of the things that they've talked about what farming might look like. Is everything zero grav, or do you have like gravity?
Thanks to the same system that makes the atmosphere on Mars, they have earthworm gravity there, and also on Callisto, also for the same reason. All of that technology is kind of bundled together: atmosphere, earthworm gravity. The space stations, of which the biggest one is the Saturn station out there, has all of the stations have 0.7 gravity for normal. So
okay.
And I think it's a reform on the cycler because it's an O'Neill cylinder, so it spins. So that has earthworm gravity too.
Yeah. Do you have any we've talked a lot about the main characters. We can't, because it's a mystery, there's only so much I can ask you because we don't want to spoil the mystery. Right. People read mysteries because they want that, who done it, figure it out as they go kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Was there anything that we didn't ask that you could tell us without giving spoilers? Or did we cover it, you think?
Let's see. Without spoiling it, I probably would leave it about there. Just the characters. We already did that. And, I forgot to mention one. Powell the hacker is probably going to be a favorite. He's a favorite of mine. I like him a lot. Think Hardison from Leverage, only in the future and with more of a bad attitude.
So what did you go with for tech? Do they have the holographic wrist displays, the tappers like the Undying Mercenaries with B.V. Larson did? Did you go with, sort of Star Trek normal tech? Like, how did you go for the tech in this world?
Sort of more for appearances, more near future, like cell phones. Yeah, only they're called mobs. I had to do something that wasn't quite. It takes kind of the future feel out of it if you just call it a cell phone, but it's not. It's a mob. Borrowed it from the Brits, which actually makes world sense because a lot of the space exploration stuff started from Australia with elevators and space elevators and that kind of stuff. But anyway, in my head, it looks a little bit futuristic, not quite floating screens and that kind of stuff, but lots of touch screens. More, I'm thinking next generation is kind of what I would make it the way it looks. But probably because I watched an awful lot of Next Generation in my life. But
nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So obviously you're working on book 3, presumably, unless it's done and it's just not in print yet.
Nope, it is being written now. I learned my lesson. Never again will I try to take a 10-year-old manuscript and make it pretty. That sucked. I'm never doing that again. This one is going from scratch, and hopefully it will be done much faster. So yeah, if you ever, this is my advice for any writers out there. If you have something that you wrote a decade ago, outline it, chuck the original, and start completely over because it's just not worth doing it any other way. You will beat your head against the brick wall, and it will not be fun. That was terrible, which is what happened with book 2. Don't do that. But
it's one of those things where You almost are writing with two writers at that point, past you and current you.
Yeah, and it sounds so different. So it's like, oh, I'm reading this paragraph and this sounds really good. Whoa, who wrote this paragraph? Oh, that was me 10 years ago. And it needed such a deep tissue massage and all this garbage that it's like, nope, don't do that again. But fortunately, book 3 exists because all the stuff that I had in book 2 wouldn't fit in book 2. So we took a huge chunk of it out and moved it to book 3. This one will be organized crime. So that should be a lot of fun.
Okay. Do you have like basically an evolution of current geopolitics, or did you have some sort of event in the future that makes the politics of this different?
Well, it's not a lot of sci-fi goes with the whole one world government thing just because it's a little easier if you talk about the whole planet as just one entity, kind of like one country, which I understand and it makes perfect sense. But in this one, we went with basically all the countries on Earth are still there, but because it's only in our universe and there aren't any aliens, that made it a little bit simpler. Basically, if there's a colony on another planet or moon, it's basically run by the country that put it there. And there is the government of space, which has no jurisdiction whatsoever on Earth, is the Interplanetary Commonwealth. So if you are out in space, you have a colony out there, you have representation in the Interplanetary Parliament. And it's your basic usual political infighting that we have all over Earth, only it's in space. Just because, once again, human beings don't really change all that much. Think the UN, only maybe not quite that totally useless. I mean, it has a whole backstory with the government, but we don't have a lot of, I'm not going to run that through the whole poor podcast. People would be going, what the heck? But it's not the one world government like in most sci-fi. So there are still, French and British and American and Texan and, Russian and you name it. There's all kinds of colonies belonging to everybody.
Did you go with the mega corporations have their own planets too, or their own colonies, or did you keep it with like political country states essentially?
Basically, originally in the backstory, this hasn't actually come up in the plot yet, but we have it filed away so that we can address it if we need to. The Commonwealth didn't start out as a government; it started out as a business entity for all of the off-planet business corporations that were out there, and then it evolved into a government because this is, like I said, 400 years in the future, and that's why it's got weird habits for a government because it wasn't one originally. But as far as corporations actually having their own little fiefdom, about the only one that does is Tesseract Incorporated, and they're the ones that invented and built and run the monorail system and the satellites that keep the atmosphere in place on 2 different planets and most of the space stations. That would be the only one that has that kind of status. Tesseract actually has a city on the moon, and it belongs to them. So they do have a representation in Parliament. They're the only ones, though.
Okay. So. What made you decide that it was going to start with Australia?
That would be my husband's fault, and I just heard the garage door, so he should be walking in here in a couple seconds. According to what he was telling me about, because he's the science guy, I was an English major. I don't do math, and my science is like this much. So he was telling me that in the event that we can build a space elevator, Australia is one of the most likely places to put it because it could get to orbit more easily from there. And so if that's the spot where you put it, then the likelihood of you getting a lot of your first colonists, your first companies going out in space, if it's already in Australia, then, oh yeah, they're going to have kind of one leg up from most of the other countries because they're right there and it's their space elevator.
Okay. All right. There's plenty of room for jokes about kangaroos and emus in there somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll have to look up why that would be a good location. I'm sure there's a reason for it, and I just don't know it. But I always like learning new things. So, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think we want to before we wrap this up?
I sure can't think of it. We did science, we did the characters, and
I will ramble if I'm not careful, so I try to keep myself on track. So what are you writing now besides, are you just focusing on book 3 or are you doing something else as well?
Right now it's book 3. I just had a really long talk with my father-in-law, who is a former JAG lawyer, former FBI retired guy, and he helped me with a lot of the organized crime stuff. So I'm trying to make it really believable and interesting. So working on that. I got I don't outline. I am a pantser, and I work better with pantsing than outlining. But I did do the outline, so this one should make more sense and be very, very clear. But he really helped me out a lot with that, and it was a lot of fun to just get him to talk about what he knows from his experience as law enforcement. And other than that, I have a fantasy that I'm working on right now, and it's basically a King Arthur sort of alternate history, and hopefully it'll be just a one-off. It started with an interesting debate. It was one of those Facebook conversations that went off into fun La La Land. It was about I think it was talking about the show Merlin.
Okay.
To debate whether how could you ever have a black Merlin? That doesn't make any sense. Which is not, I'm not trying to be totally racist or anything, but it's just, if you're talking about Camelot in the middle of England in the 7th century, people are going to look a certain way. I'm going, well, okay, if I really wanted to do that, how could I pull it off? And it turned into I could time travel somebody who would come back and take the place of Merlin, and it turned into this humongous plot line. And I'm going, this is too good. I have to write it. So that's how that started.
Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, basically.
Except it's a Texas Ranger in the court of Camelot.
So the only problem with that is you can't go back as far as you think in an English-speaking country with modern English, because at a certain point in time it becomes a separate language that is indistinguishable from modern English.
Oh yeah, I had to take Middle English in college.
Yeah, well, Middle English is hard enough. Go to Old English.
Yeah, Old English. I wasn't brave enough to take Old English. Dr. Rice was teaching that class, and I was not brave enough to do that.
Yeah, and at a certain point in time, like the vowels and the consonants and the all of that, I can't remember the linguistics of it, but all of that changed. So if you actually listen to some of Shakespeare in the original Middle English, it actually rhymed a lot more, and it was more pleasing auditory. I didn't understand all of it, but I've heard
original pronunciation.
Yeah, right. Shakespeare in the Round. It was a class I took, and so it was definitely an interesting experience. But yeah, so you can get around that with plot armor, though. So
Yeah, I love plot armor.
Of course he can understand them. He's got a universal translator sewn in the back of his ear.
And somehow, when you go through the Stargate, everybody speaks English.
Yeah, well, I never did. They ever try to explain that? I don't think they did.
Well, I guess you could kind of reach it because we'll just assume that Daniel Jackson is actually translating, but it was too much trouble to put on television. I can go with that. And they're all human because they all came from Earth originally, so it's only a matter, of very slightly stretching the plot armor for,
Well, Jafar
was translating and go with it.
The Jafar had their own language, so there was that.
Jafar, agree. Okay.
Yeah, some of the planets that were they had other languages, but they also spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
So you could get you saw more of that in SG-1 than you did Atlantis or whatever. So I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I'm gonna have to dig back into the lore and see what they say on that one, because now I'm curious. But okay, and where can they find you on the Wild Wild interwebs if they wanted to check out your stuff? And obviously, show notes will be linked down below.
Yep. Stories are available on Amazon, and I am always on Twitter and Facebook. Twitter and Facebook, and I don't have Instagram, but Twitter, Facebook, and I do have the blog at littlesquirrelbooks.com, which I'm going to try to be much better about updating. I'm really bad about that.
Every author.
Sorry, I work and I have 3 kids. I'm sorry. The brain sometimes just doesn't work. So
this is episode 398 for this series. And we had another 200 when we were Sci-Fi Shenanigans, and I will guarantee you every author we've ever interviewed I promise I'll do better at my website. No one ever does. It's just really we tell ourselves. So
I feel better now.
Yeah. No, you're not alone. We all do it. Like we all mean to. And at some point in time, I got away with it because I stopped saying it was my blog. I'm like, oh, it's my website. Then I didn't have to post as much because it's not like a digital journal.
I like that.
So
I won't call it a blog anymore. I will have to do that. It is not my website, not my blog.
Yeah. And so because it's just, I could write the novel or I could, write the blog posts, and blog posts are free, and novels hopefully I can earn a little money at.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, you can find us, dear listener, at our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the TikToks, the YouTubes. As long as the TikTok lasts, who knows where that'll be. We have our Twitter. We have our email at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. We have a Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. And more importantly, we have Madam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitters, and emails. So send all the unprofessional stuff to her. She doesn't care. We have our website, anchor.fm/blasters tech blades. Again, anchor.fm/blasters-and-blades, where for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. Every little bit helps. I know we've been saying that at some point in time that address is going to change because Spotify and anchor.fm have merged. As soon as that happens, we will update the links on those episodes going forward. We will update the link tree. But I just don't know what that's going to be at the moment. So we'll stick with what I know the link is now. We have our website, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley, where you can help keep the lights on. Every little bit helps. And if you put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until the coffee pours out of their eyeballs and the tea pours out of their ears. We'll go twofer on that one. And this is the part where I forgot earlier, but I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. So do your part. It especially helps indie creators and small presses tweak the algorithm so people can find their amazing books. So, every little review helps, dear listener. And with that said, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And with that, we are out. Thank you for coming on, Lori.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right. Oof. Wait for it.